In this episode of Highlight Sundays, Android, 4K, and interview questions. Hello and welcome back to Highlight Sundays. It is the 24th week of 2014 and here are your highlights. We start off with our PSA concerning Android. This one comes from Ars Technica and is entitled Android no longer reviews permission changes in automatic updates. So here's the deal. If you've been using an Android device, you have noticed when downloading new apps from Google Play that Android has basically streamlined their permission system. So in a nutshell, here's how this works. Every Android app is actually run in a sandbox, and what this means is it doesn't have access to anything regarding your phone. It can only basically modify and access what is explicitly given to it. And while that is extremely secure, it is also not very useful because most apps do need to access certain features of your phone, otherwise they cannot serve a very interesting purpose. And that is where the entire permission system comes in. Basically, if a program needs to do something outside of its sandbox, it's gonna have to actually, basically ask for permission. This is why every time you download an app, you actually see a list of permissions. These are all the things that basically the program needs to function. In the past, all the permissions were individual, so each one of them basically said one thing and served that one purpose. But now, Google has actually made things simpler. Basically, all the individual permissions still exist, but they're now grouped into little groups. And that's all well and good, but the problem comes about when basically an update comes along and some of the permissions change. In the past, they will actually show you where the permissions have changed, but now, because of this entire grouping method, you will only see the groups that have changed. What this means is if between an old version and an update, basically the groups stay the same, but the individual permissions within the groups change, that will not be shown to you unless you individually expand the groups. What this means is without being explicitly clear, app developers can actually change up permissions to possibly give an app more access to your phone in a way that you will not be informed about. So that's one thing to look out for. Personally, I update my apps manually and only when I feel there's a need to do so. And yeah, I'll tend to actually poke through the permissions to make sure that everything is still okay. As it stands, I don't really use a whole lot of apps, so this is also less of a problem for me. So yeah, I guess this is just an extra thing you have to look out for in the future. Unfortunately, it is an extra step, so it's not that productive, but hopefully it's just a minor inconvenience. Alright, let us now move on to our next article. This one comes from Gizmodo and is entitled Panasonic FZ1000, a large sensor super zoom that shoots 4K video. Disclaimer, not really a large sensor, it is a 1-inch sensor, which to be fair is indeed larger than basically all the cameras in this particular class. Bridge cameras, in case you're not familiar with the term, are basically point and shoot cameras, except they are made to look like DSLRs and function like DSLRs. So another way to think of this is basically you scale down the DSLR and you remove the interchangeable lens capability. Having said that, this camera seems to be the camera for the amateur cinematographer. I mean, as a wannabe filmmaker myself, this camera has a lot of the features that I dream about. Things like shooting flat video, 4K, 1080p at 60 frames per second. All these are features geared at hobbyists wanting to take their first serious step into cinematography. This camera is also reasonably cheap. I mean, it's not really easy to compare this to any other cameras that are out there because nothing really falls into this bridge camera category while also falling in an offering 4K video category. So it's hard to compare, and if you compare this against, the bridge cameras that are out there, then yes, it is more expensive, but that would not be a fair comparison because this contains features that the others don't have. At any rate, the Panasonic FZ1000 costs $900 and will be available in July. And moving away from the tech news, let us take a look at an article regarding job interviews. Why? Because it takes a close look at some of the more up-and-coming interesting techniques at delivering job interviews. I guess based on the demographic of people watching this channel, probably you'll be going for job interviews in the near future or in fact almost right now. So I guess this will be useful for you. And in addition to that, if you happen to have a need to give an interview in the future, these are interesting techniques to apply as well. This article comes from fastcompany.com and is entitled HubSpot Reviews the Mind Tricks It Uses to See If You're Right for a Job. Now, I'm not actually going to go through the details of this article because first, it's pretty long, and second, it's definitely a good read, so I would recommend you actually read through it. But, well, I just talk about one of the more prominently featured tricks mentioned in this article. Basically, the interviewer gives the interviewee maybe a drink or, some food, anything with a packaging, and what they're looking for is at the end of the interview, the person should actually throw the wrapper away. Now, this might seem a little strange, but according to the article, it actually tells a lot about a person's personality. This is just one of the tricks. Of course, do read through the entire article. There's a lot of interesting discussion about how interviews should be trying to tell you more about, the personality of the person you're interviewing as opposed to their knowledge. So yeah, very interesting article. I do recommend you check it out. Alright, and before we wrap up today's episode, let us take a look at our recommendation of the week. Now, this is by no means new, but it's something that I've recently discovered and have been using it to great effect. This is a piece of software from WinAero.com and it's called Alt+Tab Tuner. Whenever you press alternate tab on your keyboard, of course, you are actually switching between open programs. And if you have Windows Arrow enabled, basically you will be able to see the previews of individual windows. And that's all well and good, but it's not extremely useful because the previews are pretty tiny. Among other things, one of the things that Alt+Tab Tuner can do is to actually greatly increase the size of these icons, and it's something that I found extremely useful after setting up. You can do other things like change the margins, change the actual icon of the program, how many columns and rows you want to see when you do Alt+Tab, that kind of stuff. The main thing I use it for is to make those previews bigger, which I find useful. And that's it. That's it for this episode of Highlight Sundays. Nothing to vlog about today, so I'm just gonna go ahead and close off this episode. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, you're watching 0612 TV. Hello, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, remember that I appreciate every like, favorite, and comment you give me. If you'd like to see more from me in the future, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And for more updates outside of YouTube, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at 0612TV. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.